Okay, we're calling the meeting to order at 2:33. We have a moment of reflection, Pledge of Allegiance led by Trustee Crane.
Let's all stand. Right hand over your heart. Let's begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, now we'll move to roll call. Sam?
Trustee Ursulou?
Here?
Trustee Murphy?
Here.
Trustee Pearson?
Here.
Trustee McElroy?
Here.
Trustee Anderson?
Here.
Trustee Crane?
Here.
Trustee Wiegand? Dr. Smith?
Here.
Great, and the adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
moved by Trustee Crane and seconded by Trustee Pearson. And roll call vote? Sam?
Trustee Ursulou?
Yes?
Trustee Murphy?
Yep.
Trustee Pearson?
Yes.
Trustee McElroy?
Yes.
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
Trustee Crane?
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand?
Great. And now we will move on to community input on special agenda items only. Clerk Pearson, would you read the?
Oh my gosh, what's my favorite?
This is an opportunity for the public to address the board regarding items on the special meeting agenda only. Comments on special meeting agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per comment, up to 20 minutes per topic. A speaker may not relinquish his or her time to another person.
Okay, and with that, we have one comment. Jeremy Lohr, Costa Mesa.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeremy Lohr, the student board member from Early College High School. As student board members this week, we were asked to come up with ways in which funds might be wasted at each of our school sites. At Early College High School, I was able to brainstorm with a few peers and come up with some ideas. The first thing we realized was that our field was closed 2 years in a row. At the start of my sophomore year and at the start of my junior year, our field was closed for renovations on the sprinkler system and for seating projects. The only part that seemed odd to us was that it happened twice, not only once. We weren't sure if it closed twice because the first year maintenance was insufficient, but it was definitely something that piqued our interest. Another point that came up repeatedly throughout my term as student board member has been the internet services. I do not know the exact cost, but I assume that the equipment is regularly updated and maintained. Yet it often feels slow to students and somewhat insufficient. Sometimes the internet on my laptop will cut out and make it difficult to do work in class. Moreover, on any mobile device, whether it be my phone or my tablet, sending a text or making a Google search is almost impossible. On the opposite note of wasteful spending, I heard some students bring up paper tutoring. We learned after this past summer that we would lose access to it, and on the topic of the budget, some students brought up education technology and paper tutoring specifically. They noted that having the opportunity to connect with a tutor at any time was incredibly helpful and important to them. These were the main issues that I heard conveyed from the students. In closing, I typically would have presented these ideas at the regular meeting tonight at 6 p.m. However, tonight I'll be speaking instead about questions and concerns I have regarding the Banning Ranch development, so I thought it would be best to share my budget thoughts at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And with that, we'll begin the budget study session.
Thank you, Madam President and trustees, for allowing us to do this before a regular meeting. I know it takes a lot of time, but we really appreciate having this discussion with you today. There we go. Okay, so being that it's February, this is all the information you see is still based on first interim data. So this isn't a new graph for you. This is our multi-year projection, and it comes straight from first interim. We know that this year we're projected to spend more than we receive in revenue. However, that begins balancing out next year through concerted efforts that we're hopefully going to talk through tonight. And then by 2027-28, we're back having our revenues exceed our expenditures. So what that does in terms of why we're wanting to talk with you today is we know we want to get back to higher than a 17% amount in our reserves. And there's ways that we can do that, but we need your direction to those efforts. So this is a photo from last year's budget study session. And it's going to be, I want to acknowledge, it's just going to be a very different conversation we're going to have today. We're going to focus in hopefully on areas that you can help us identify that you want to see some savings or see us do things more efficiently so that we can reallocate the resources to your goals and priorities. In order to do that, I'm going to briefly go over the budget timeline where we're at today and the governor's January budget proposal. It's meant to be more of an insert and a handout than it is part of the slide presentation, because one thing we know for sure, it's going to change. But I did want to highlight some of the information from the January proposal for you. And then we're going to get into the meat of the presentation, which is to highlight our expenditures. And we're going to take a little deeper dive based on object code into those expenditures, and then allow you to have dialogue about what you want to see in each category. So here we are today. Following our first interim report, we have our budget study session here in February, and we'll be coming back to you next month with second interim. Third interim would be a requirement if we had a qualified or negative budget, which we do not, but I just like to put it up there so you're aware. Any questions on the format we have for tonight or preliminary discussion, feedback? Okay, great. So we know, generally speaking, the January, oh, sorry.
Yeah, my cup is blocking. Sorry, Trustee
okay.
Anderson had a question.
Thank you. On the, I think it's the third slide where it talks about the fund balance, can you talk about the cash flow requirements typically between the adopted versus the first interim?
Yeah, so you're looking at the ending fund balance, the category called cash flow requirements. It can be called different things. In other districts, it's called assigned, and it's usually for board goals and priorities, and it's just in there. Because it's not tied to a specific expenditure, it's just in the ending fund balance, and that's what we call it here in Newport-Mesa.
Right. Oh, sorry. To clarify, so is it typical for the first interim to look slightly lower than it might at the second or the final budget?
It's typical for the first interim to look a little different than the adopted budget. Whether that's slightly lower or higher just depends on the year. A good example of that is when we received one-time funds, it might look a lot better at first interim because we didn't know at adopted budget we were going to get those funds.
Yeah. The reason I bring it up because this is what Jeff Trader always called our cash dry period, and so I just want to highlight that as that's the largest deficit within that, and I think that's telling from the adopted versus the first interim. It's not necessarily what will be even at the second interim next month.
Right. Yeah, as we get into September, October, November, those are really tough for us because we're waiting for that first big property tax revenue allocation.
Thank you.
Okay, so generally speaking, the budget was good for education, minus a couple points that I'll draw into. There was a 2.41% proposed COLA. You can see the history of the Prop 98 funding here, again, trending in a positive way from last year to next year with the $125.5 billion. They're paying back some of the deferrals, or they're proposing to pay back some of the deferrals, and also that little accounting trick for the $1.9 billion of underfunding Prop 98. What's concerning with the January proposal, however, is they are proposing to do another underfunding of Prop 98 by $5.6 billion. So this is much higher than the $1.9 billion they did last year. And they're basing that on uncertainty. And to me, when you increase it by that much, there's certainly a level of fear as well on their part. And I think for the most part, they don't need to do that, right? This is a January proposal on the budget. They have time to make adjustments over the year, beginning with the May revision. So they'll have a better picture of the revenues by then. So it really wasn't necessary. But it also does, because of the revenue assumptions, triggers some money going back into the Prop 98 Rainy Day Fund, which is a good thing. And some programs received the COLA in the proposal and some do not. We do not receive all of these categoricals listed up here, but we do receive some of them, and you can see which ones are getting the 2.41% COLA and which ones are not. Outside of the COLA, there are some separate investments as well into some of the categorical programs that you see up here. We receive all of these, so this would be a good benefit for our district if it were to go through. And what's really intriguing about the proposal is there is a $2.8 billion discretionary block grant, which is good for us. Although they identify some state priority areas to spend it, it is truly discretionary. And for us, it would equate to a little, almost $8 million. And lastly, a positive thing that I thought came out of the budget proposal was they recognized the increased costs associated with home to school transportation, so they allocated some one-time money there. So I know that was quick going through the January budget proposal, but we also know it's going to change. But now I want to stop and give an opportunity for you to ask any questions or have a discussion amongst yourself. All right, I suspect we're saving all the questions for our expenditure categories.
Jeff,
here.
I just wanted to add that just so the community remembers, the board knows this, we have some advocacy contracts. We work like with capital advisors to help us on issues like this. And one of the things that we'll be asking them to lean into is that any of the block grant monies are on an ADA basis, not an LCFF basis. We want to make sure that our students in this district have access to those same funds. And the only way that happens is through an ADA dispersion model. So they're already working that in Sacramento. They were successful. You'll remember the last time this came up with that same argument. So again, we're hopeful. But just want the community to know we have allies in Sacramento advocating for our students with regard to those block grant monies.
Yeah, it's a very good point because the work they do is very important, especially for community-funded districts. Okay, so briefly, again, this is our revenue projection, almost $500 million for the year. And this is as of first interim. So we'll have maybe a slightly different figure at second interim, but right now this is a pretty good forecast. So now what we're going to do on the next several slides is go through our expenditure categories. As we dig into those object codes, in your handout you have the chart of accounts that shows the object code so you can see everything that's within those numbers that I'm presenting to you. So I just want to make sure you know that as a reference point. And again, I think one of the things we would be very helpful for staff today is identifying those areas you want to see more efficient work or changes that we can lower some costs and eventually increase our reserves and or increase contributions to Fund 40 for future facility projects. So we begin with our certificated salaries, and this is all certificated, so everyone with a credential. You can see that it's trended up over time, almost $40 million since 2022-23. But then you want to break it down by individual categories. So we start first with these are the actual classroom teachers. So these are instructing our students. And you can see, again, this will be a common theme that you'll see with staffing costs. They increase over time, whether that be by increases in compensation or just naturally through step and column movement. Then you see our pupil support salaries. These are not directly instructing the students, but they are supporting the work of our teachers and the student supports themselves. You can see, again, trending up over time. Then you have our supervisor/administrator salaries. A big thing that I would point out here is when we added the Extended Learning Opportunity Program, we had those after-school programs added at the Title I schools. We also added admin interns to oversee those, and they're in this section, and that's why you see the bump. And then you have other certificated, and really the bulk of these costs are your teachers on special assignment, so the TOSAs. When you look at classified salaries, again, we're seeing the similar trend of an increase over time. Diving a little deeper into it, you have our instructional aides. You see that's increased from 13 million to a little over 20 million. You have our support salaries, so this will be like your maintenance and custodial. That's also generally increasing over time. And then you have your supervisor salaries. So this is all the directors and administrators in classified. Then we get to our clerical. So this will be like your front office staff. And last, we have other classified salaries. And this is just going to be, sorry, I forgot this one off the top of my head. That's why I wanted to include this as a reference. Oh yeah, a big part of this is going to be your school community facilitators. So it is good to note that the expenditure data related to salaries for certificated and classified has trended relatively the same. So they've both increased over time, and that's what the intent of these trend lines is to show. That's not always the case for districts. You can see some discrepancy between certificated and classified, but that's not the case here. So, and that's a very good thing. So thank you. When we look at benefits, the first slide you see here, this is just medical, so health and welfare. These have increased every year, and everyone's experienced an increase in healthcare costs. I know we are looking at different delivery models or opportunities to maybe go to market, or we're trying to explore everything to at least we can slow the rising in the costs of healthcare, if not, hopefully save some money. And we'll talk about that when we get to kind of our consideration slide. This is all the other benefits, and these are like your statutory benefits. So they're a percentage based on salary. So these have increased over time, but that makes sense because salaries have increased over time. And a big chunk of this is going to be related to the retirement. So your STRS and PERS, and those are a big chunk on the percent of salary. Again, we see a similar trend here with our benefits. Not unexpected, and again, being experienced statewide. Across the board, everyone's seeing increase in benefit costs. When you look at our materials and supplies, it's increased quite a bit from 2022 to 23, from a little over 14 million to a little over 25 million. And this would be anything that's equipment purchase that's under $5,000. It could be paper, toner, classroom supplies. So given that information, we think that through natural attrition with staffing, where we look at when people leave or retire, if we could not have to replace them or rethink the work that we do to not have to replace someone, there could be potential of $3 million in savings just based on what we know today. We could look into ways to reduce the need for extra hours and overtime. Again, I didn't put a dollar figure there because that gets a little complex and tricky, but that, if the board wanted us to look into ways to do that, I'm more than happy to. We can evaluate the health and welfare program, and Tracy and I are in the process of doing that and exploring other options we may be able to latch onto to support our employees. The big thing we want to consider with benefits, health benefits especially, is we want to minimize disruption. So when I say disruption, plan disruption, that means you have an employee who's going to a certain healthcare provider, and if we change, they would no longer be able to go to that healthcare provider. And you don't want to do that. You want to minimize that. And maybe an idea would be to reduce materials and supplies. And if we did that, the amount of budget, if we did that across the board, you could see a 5% reduction. It would translate to $1.2 million in savings. This is by no means meant to be an all-encompassing list of ideas. This is just considerations to hopefully spark your conversation. And if you have additional ideas, we are taking notes, and we will certainly follow up. But this is going to be kind of the helpful part for us, where you can take over and let us know your thoughts.
Trustee Murphy?
Thanks, Jeff. Just looking at the comparison right between certificated and classified staff on the salary trend. So as far as I can tell, looks like this is 200,000 that the certificated are getting close to.
Let me go back to the slide. In terms of salary, correct.
Okay. But classified are still down at 80?
Correct. Yep. And but again, this is based on total dollars budgeted, so this is in millions for all employees. This isn't individual salaries. So this is just the budget for the certificated and the classified staff. It's the total amount of the budget. So it gets to this, I'll go back to overall cost history. So you see the classified, a little over $81 million total district-wide, whereas certificated is $195 million total to cover all certificated employees.
And Trustee Pearson?
Did you have it done? No.
Well, anyways, I'm still a little concerned about that, but I like how you say that the lines are similar, but they're not exactly.
Correct. Correct. But they're trending the same, which is nice, and you don't always see that with school districts.
Okay.
Can I add that, you know, a lot of the salaries are dependent upon salary schedules. So and that's established, right? That's negotiated, established. What this trend shows, though, is as we are growing over time, that both are growing similarly, right? Based on those salary schedules. So one is not prioritized over another, that movement is progressing pretty closely. The other conversation about where salary schedules are and all that depends upon the work that folks do, how many hours they spend, et cetera, et cetera. This just represents that total dollar amount, and a lot of districts aren't experiencing that, which is, I think, the point you made earlier.
Yep. And I will say this will see on the classified side, because of the recent work that was done with negotiations and us having to move the hour calculation up to 173.333 versus 168, it caused an increase in our employees' monthly wages that will increase the trend for classified here. So it'll tighten up a little bit.
That would be great. Thanks.
One is part of that too, similar to what you were saying, where we're having longevity, right? So people are staying longer, whereas before that wasn't happening necessarily with our classified staff. There was much more turnover, and so that's one of the things that to me stands out from that is we have people that are classified that are staying for longer, and so they're getting higher on the step schedule, which is wonderful.
Yeah. Retention is very important.
Great. Next we had Trustee Pearson and then Trustee Crane. Press their buttons.
Yeah, thank you for this. When you say reduce material and supplies by 5% across all sites, are we talking instructional inside the classrooms as well?
Yeah, that number doesn't deviate from what type of material and supply. That's just a 5% of the total materials and supplies budget. So if you want to be specific and say only focusing on these supplies or these types of materials, absolutely open to that, but this is based on the total budget for materials and supplies.
Okay, yeah, you would definitely have my vote to up that number everywhere else, but except in the classrooms. I don't feel like, I mean, it's really important
Agree.
to me to make sure that the kids in our classrooms have what they need to learn.
Mhm.
I think that's more important than any, you know, Xerox machine or.
So materials and supplies, we can look at ways to reduce that by up to 5% outside of our classrooms.
Outside of the classroom, yeah.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Did you have anything more, Trustee Peterson, or do we move to Trustee Crane? Oh, okay.
Hi. This is great. Thank you. I wanted to go back to the governor's budget real quick in the interest of the public as well, so that when they hear $5.6 billion being held, the governor is legally bound to give us our Prop 98 money, right? This is why they call these maneuvers. So the $5.6 billion, we're not acting when we budget as if we're not going to get this money at some point, right? Because this money, if anything, will be a deferral or those types of, if it were to happen, which I personally don't think it's legal for it to happen. Because I do know CSBA is currently litigating the past maneuver that the governor's office had
Yeah.
back last year, I believe.
Yeah. No,
So
it's
can
a
you
good
expand
question.
on that so that the public's not panicking like we're going to be out a bunch of money?
Yeah, especially since we are community funded, we don't actually get this money anyway, so we wouldn't have a deferral imposed upon us.
Right.
as community funded, we want to focus in on the categorical funds that we get and the discretionary block grants that are allocated ADA based.
Yeah.
So there's where we see an impact to us, but not in this regard. And what's unfortunate about this is it's still being used, that $5.6 billion, to fund non-Prop 98 programs.
Right.
And so it becomes an IOU almost
Right.
for the 98 side.
Because the discussion I went to during the workshop is that California is trying to backfill the shortfalls that we made from the federal government not getting money to health services and such things.
Right.
So they're backfilling, and so they're using some of that money to use. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Of course.
Could you clarify the slide number 25 for TOSAs, where it says 22-23, we had a 5.8 million approximately allocation, and it grew to 10 million, 25 and 25-26. Two questions. How many bodies does this represent? And then where are these TOSAs? And how are they supporting the classroom?
I don't know the exact number of bodies, but that's information we can pull. And at the same time, we can provide the supports as well. This was just straight from budget information, not
Okay.
tied to specific people.
We do have other assistant superintendents in the room, though, who might know more of those answers, so perhaps they can get some context to how TOSAs are employed in the district, especially to support classroom instruction. So if any of the assistant supes want to weigh in on that answer.
Yeah, I'll start for secondary. We have several TOSAs that support classroom instruction, and we have several in English language development. They specifically work with our teachers who support our English learners across all of the 7 through 12 sites, including our alternative schools. Additionally, we also have what we call content area TOSAs. So we have a TOSA in math, English, science, and history. Those individuals are responsible for training up our teachers in their content areas, in their curriculum, their new adoptions, and then they also do classroom support. And those positions were added over the course of the last 3 years. And so we added those to really be able to fortify the instruction in the classroom. And our principals would say that those individuals are doing really outstanding work in helping teachers deliver the high quality instruction in those areas.
Elementary has more, it's not as specific to the subject area, so elementary has instructional TOSAs as well as their ed tech TOSAs that span the K-12, PK-12 continuum. As Carrie mentioned, there are ELD also at the elementary, the English language development, and all of them do several things. They do the professional development. They push into classrooms when teachers have requests for learning about a new strategy or having someone in the classroom give them feedback. Sometimes the TOSA is modeling and demonstrating the lesson. Sometimes they're side by side with the teacher. Sometimes they're giving the teacher feedback. And so it is part of job embedded professional development, the job that the TOSAs do.
Yeah, and they're also helping with some of our content areas, specifically when we look at reading foundational skills. We have a lot of work happening there with some of the letters training that the TOSAs are involved with supporting our teachers with. We have an English language arts program, and the TOSAs are constantly supporting our teachers in the classroom with the work that we're doing with implementing our ELA program, with our science adoption. They're helping with that, and also with social studies. So those 4 main areas are definitely a focus area, and the TOSAs I would say Lori Hernandez has done a really nice job of having our TOSAs not focused just on one, but on a number of those different areas so they can cross-pollinate and share ideas. So there's a full court press on those 4 content areas, and they're doing a lot to help support students and teachers.
They also do professional development on our early release Wednesdays at elementaries. and they're major players in the design and delivery of professional development at the beginning of school on those all teacher days and the one in November.
So, were you done on that side of the table? So I'll talk a little bit about who we have in special education as our TOSAs. So we have an early learning special education TOSA who really focuses on our inclusive practices at preschool, TK, at K first, that area. We have our 4 elementary mild mod, you might refer to them as the DST team, and they support all of our mild mod teachers and really work on a lot of the PLT things. The same thing from Ed Division. They're in classrooms, they're supporting teachers, they're working on how to do accommodations to the curriculum. We also have TOSAs that are supporting our teachers of our extensive needs, our moderate severe classrooms, and really those are modifications they need. They're working with teachers on how we implement our curriculum, the unique learning systems into those classrooms. And then we, a couple years ago, we added a TOSA, another TOSA at secondary to support our students kind of in mild mod programs. And we have a lot of students at some of our schools that kind of fit between some of our programs. So we added a TOSA to support those school sites too. And then we have a TOSA who supports inclusion. We have students who are fully included and it's in their IEP and she provides support to them. We also have service providers / TOSAs, many of our autism specialists. They are direct service providers for students, but then we also have a piece of their job is working with classroom teachers and building classroom management systems, behavior systems for students.
Thank you.
Next we have, I believe, Trustee Pearson, then Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, a quick question about the TOSAs. Where are they housed?
So I'll speak for secondary, and thank you, because I forgot to mention one very important factor, is that this year, all of the 4 secondary mesh TOSAs in those particular areas are housed at Newport Harbor, and they're also teaching TOSAs. So in secondary, our model is where they are required to also teach that content area to be able to inform that content area. That's a shift we made in 2023, and that's been highly valuable. And then our ELD TOSAs are housed at the Best Center. For secondary.
At elementary, they're in a bunch of different places. We're always kind of trying to figure out space and figuring out which sites have available rooms for them to be in. There's some. Oh, and I also wanted to mention we have an arts TOSA as well, so I just want that on the record. Yeah, so we have them all over, many at sites. Like there's some at Wilson, there's one at Davis, there's really where the appropriate space is there for them, and they share offices. It's a communal workspace for most of them. But again, we're just kind of, and we've changed over the years depending where we can fit.
Yeah, I love seeing them away from district offices and in the schools. I was just at a lunch with somebody who mentioned a TOSA by name at CDM. I think it was a special ed TOSA. I mean, they're the experts, and it's so nice to have them on campuses so that our kids benefit from them and the money we spend on the TOSAs. I love hearing that we are moving them towards the campuses and not in district offices, because I think our kids really can benefit from that money that we're spending.
And our teachers.
Trustee Anderson?
Thanks. To the second bullet that you have, looking into ways to reduce the need for extra hours and overtime, and looking at our budget, the area that stood out to me most as an area of opportunity to reduce costs is under operations. We have nearly $500,000 that is a budget line item. We have $450,000 that is a line item for overtime as needed. That is higher than any other budgeted item within that section, which concerns me. I think that's something that if we need to hire more staff, that could be something. If we need to do substitutes, I think that's something, but I think to have a line item that high is concerning to me. And then similarly to, I don't know if we need to be hiring, again, 1 or 2 more people, but also under operations, we have a line item for $1.2 million for custodians, I would assume, custodial subs. Again, I think we need to be hiring some more people. That's great. We maybe need to look into doing things a little bit differently in operations to me. I think that could be, I know that the request was maybe 5%, but I think there's some departments that have maybe swollen over time and have just been kind of, in looking at some of the budgets in the past, they've just been, this is what's always put ahead. Like every single budget, it's the same amount or it's more. It's not necessarily a reduction in a lot of areas. So I would like to see something like that before, as Trustee Pearson brought up, and we're making decisions about things at sites or that directly impact students.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, it's complex, right? Because over time, sometimes it's unavoidable when you have an emergency or we know a storm's coming, for example, and we want to get our sites prepped, and that happens on a Sunday. That's going to trigger overtime, and the money we spend there helps prevent damages that would cost more money. So we'll definitely take a look at it. I think we'd want to work with our bargaining unit partners as well, because there's usually things in the contract that have to be implemented or could be related to additional hours and overtime. So happy to dig in to take a look at that, though. We want to be efficient.
Thank you.
Trustee Crane?
Yeah, I forgot to ask or make a comment, actually. I'm very excited about being creative and innovative in looking at our health and welfare benefits for different models, because I have heard of some successful ones, and especially if you co-op with other districts or whatever, or you create your own. I mean, there's a lot there that can be done and at a very good savings. So thank you for taking. It's a big project, but could be a great one.
Absolutely. You
And I just want to say we also have a very dedicated JBT that we partner with our administrative groups and both of our bargaining units that are equally committed and really eager to want to dig in and do the same. So I just want to make sure that I point that out.
There could be some good savings in that. To the benefit of the district and also the staff, which is what the JBT is all about, is collaborating with all the wings.
We think so too.
Great, thank you.
One another TOSA group, I want to make sure we, and this is from board direction too, is remember when we sought to expand accelerated opportunities at elementary, we did that through TOSAs. We did that for innovation
we're excited
TOSAs.
about that one.
So those are new TOSAs as well.
That's good.
And building their experiences and their capacity, and then building the experiences of other teachers for working with GATE and accelerated students and offering those type of accelerated activities.
Yeah, we've waited a long time for them, so thank you for that
So they're in the
advanced
bucket
learning.
too.
And I have the letters that they've been sending out, sent to me from parents. I mean, the buzz is out, and that is definitely such an amazing program that you guys started. Thank you.
All right, one more from Trustee Anderson, and then we should probably let you continue because you're not halfway.
I just wanted to ask for perhaps when we go over the second interim, but splitting up the instructional and the non-instructional supplies, to have such a large jump from 2023 to 2025, or even 22, of almost $10 million. Usually we don't see that unless we're having, we saw that when we had a math and an ELA pilot at the same time. It's really unusual to have such a large jump. So and I know we haven't done that recently in those years. So I'm interested to know why there is such a large jump from 2022, 23 to now, and which section that is in. If that's non-instructional, what are those supplies and materials to have that go up so high?
Yeah.
So it's quite dramatic.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Carrie?
Okay. So now we're moving into our services and operating, and you can see back in 2022-23, a little over 51 million, and today it's budgeted at a little over 84 million. It's pretty significant growth here. So let's take a little deeper look at where that's at. So first is our sub-agreements for services. We can't really control this too much. This is our non-public schools, and we have to meet the needs of our students. But fortunately, it's not a humongous number that we're having to not be able to deal with, but just want to be transparent. There are certain areas we just can't control. Travel and conferences, however, is an area that we could look at. You can see it's been fairly consistent, and a lot of it supports a professional development district-wide. And there's a lot of new programs and instructional opportunities that this would help support. We have dues and memberships, a very small amount, and we appreciate the fact that the district does cover this for some of our professional development and some of those organizations that lobby on our behalf. And we get into insurance. This has gone up a lot, and I know it's only from $2 million to $4.5 million, but it doubled basically because of Assembly Bill 218, where we got rid of the statute of limitations on, and so we're paying back premiums from years past, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. So we have to budget for it. So that's where we're at here with this today. We have operations and housekeeping. This is a lot of our routine maintenance. You can see it's gone from 5.7 to 6.2, so modest growth year over year. And then rentals, leases, and repairs, this has gone up quite a bit, and I think this is because we really started to kick off and maintain our sites beginning 2024-25. So appreciate the investment the board has made there, but perhaps it's an area we can look at as well, and there's discussion. I won't even bring it up.
Don't mess with the playgrounds.
Don't mess with our
They still have bathrooms.
Still have bathrooms, yes. That is a priority for us.
We'll need a little more than this.
And then we have direct cost transfers. This is really just our in-house transportation where we're charging for like CIF travel and athletic stuff like that and field trips. Then we get into our professional and consulting services. So you see back in 2022, or a little over $23 million. Today, budgeted at $33.7 million. There might be some opportunity here to look at building some internal capacity and reducing some of these costs. And then communications, this is basically our phones and radio repairs. And it's the first one that we're seeing that actually came down from 2022-23. And I wanted to lump in, this is from Fund 40. So everything you've been looking at up to now is general fund. But Fund 40 would not exist without contributions from the general fund. So that's, in my mind, this is the same money. And you can see that the history of services, so this is the 5,000s, and there's a distinction between these services and the other services we have with our projects. So these services are things such as doing renderings for projects that aren't happening, but giving the board a rendering and then a cost estimate, let's say. So that's going to be in the 5,000s, and you can see the amount of work that has increased in this area. Now, please note that because we're also going to look at the 6,000s, which is the capital improvements, and that is where you're still going to get the same type of professional services like architects, engineers, inspector, but they're assigned to the 6,000s because they're associated with a project. So when you look at the multi-purpose rooms, for example, they're in the project budget. There are architect fees, construction management fees, inspection fees. This falls outside of those because they're not associated with a project. So some ideas, and these just considerations to get us jump started on our conversation, is we could minimize travel and conference to only those conferences that we deem are required, or whether for certifications that are necessary or deemed essential. So I'd make a good argument that the state budget conference that school services puts on, I would deem essential because you get a lot of really good important information there. So if we reduced travel conference, let's say by 25%, it would equate to $375,000 in potential savings, and that's a good chunk of money for us. We could set a goal to reduce our use of consultants by 5%, and that would potentially save about $900,000 if we were able to do that. And I won't say the last bullet, just because I think there's a desire by the board to continue our investment in maintenance, but it isn't an area that we have that is flexible. And I can say that as our budget grows, the percent that, of routine restricted maintenance, because it's tied to a percentage of our budget, has increased a lot. And there could be some opportunity for us to, like I had mentioned earlier, build internal capacity to help lower some of our service costs for routine maintenance so that we can continue to do the same level and amount of work that we're currently doing, but at a lesser cost, because we wouldn't be outsourcing as much.
Great, thank you for that. So I have one question related to, sorry, my light doesn't work. What is the difference between professional service utilities and the professional service consulting? Like, what are those? What's the,
So
like,
these
where
are
are like all our contracts for providers? Like when we have providers doing X, Y, and Z, is that called consulting or is that professional service and utility?
that would be part of consulting, right?
Okay.
So professional services, whereas the trying to find the, it's not there. So everything you see in the 5800s are like professional services, and some examples of that would be like legal expenses, temporary staffing agencies, that when we can't fill a vacancy at a site, we need to bring in someone. It's a lot of those things. 5800s covers quite a range of services. But they also, you see the, I'm trying to find, because I know you're talking about the utilities, and I think that's,
Oh, yeah, no, I was just concerned because professional services is listed in both, so I just didn't know which professional services. What makes you a 5,000 or a 5,800?
got it, yep.
Perfect, that's helpful, thank you. So now we can go to Trustee Murphy, then McElroy, then Anderson.
Okay, so, no, you got me on your question. So on the history of the 5,000s from Fund 40, right, Jeff? So, I mean, that's considerable, 386 to 2.7?
Yeah, it's a large percentage increase for sure. And it tells me, just knowing what I know today, there was, this investment was to look into potential projects and get maybe estimates of what it would cost. Initial planning efforts, if you will, because this is driven by facilities.
So, okay, so actually, that I was going to have this question for you anyway. So I was going through some things, and I have the, I guess the plan that was put together for Costa Mesa, right, to expand the stadium seating and to redo the locker rooms and all of that. It's beautiful. It's beautifully drawn out, beautiful locker rooms, all redone, looking very fancy. And I haven't seen any of that work actually done. I mean, I know, Carrie, you made a comment to my parents or you let me know that my parents who are concerned about not being able to get to beach volleyball with a van, that the beach volleyball courts are scheduled to be built in 27. But for instance, so that beautiful plan has been put together, but I really haven't seen anything that has come out of that per se. So is this what you're talking about? This going from 300 to 2.1?
I'm not familiar with the exact plan you're talking about, but that could be an example if it was a rendering.
Yeah,
Yes,
it was a rendering, it was a couple of pages. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that would be an example of what these services are.
Yeah, but so I guess if you're talking about cutting it, because I can see cutting it. I mean, like if we're not going to move forward with that work immediately, do I need to see the beautiful rendering? I mean,
there wouldn't be necessarily cutting to that because remember, general fund has to contribute to Fund 40 for Fund 40 to have funding to support a project. So until we get on some type of schedule with transferring or doing transfers from general fund to Fund 40, ideally on an annual basis, it will help us plan and prioritize our facilities that we can bring before you for consideration. Because right now, Fund 40 is there's nothing left. So we need to get back on a investment schedule, which is why saving and finding places we can be efficient will be so beneficial for us.
yeah, because that just seems sort of ridiculous.
Can I just comment?
I think I'm understanding why, but
Yeah. It's a great point. I think before you got here, there was kind of this trend of let's show what's possible, but isn't budgeted. And so it becomes then a frustration for the community that's borne on the shoulders of the trustees. There was almost this habit of showing them this great drawing.
Yeah.
And then the question is, so when will that happen? Well, there's no plan for it to happen.
Yeah.
But the community
Yeah.
doesn't hear that. And so I think moving forward, to your point,
Yes.
what we have to be very, very clear on is what things has the board agreed to prioritize, else let's not show them the pretty drawing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And we have the list of all the projects that were approved by the board but had no funding associated with them. So we have
Yeah.
that priority list already maintained.
Yeah. So I don't know that we've seen that. I haven't seen that list.
We maintain it internally.
Okay.
I like to under-promise, over-deliver, so I don't want to
But
promise
maybe-
any of these projects until we have the funding.
Yeah, but it would be nice to have to maybe see that, or at least get an update of it, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
Once
We
a
could
year,
we can
twice
put it
a
on
year
one
or
of the weekly
something.
updates maybe.
Yeah. Just to Wes's point is, yes, then I'll get questions about, well, where is the beautiful locker room
Well-
that you said you were gonna build with murals and like landscaping?
Trustee Murphy, I think it was probably part of the, because remember how we did that whole master facilities plan audit?
Yeah,
And there was a
oh,
lot
yeah.
of input by zone and all
No, but
this.
This
I
was
think it was
before
kind of
that.
caught up in
This is
some of
before
that, you know.
This is way before that.
And things being shared with the public but not trustees, so we weren't getting renderings first either, which was always interesting.
So that would be great. And I guess my concern about being about reductions in restricted maintenance, routine maintenance to restricted maintenance. So going to a potential savings of 7 million. So another thing that we have had a problem with is students getting hurt because we have deferred routine maintenance. Certainly complaints from families, understandably, about our fields and our, facilities not being up to par. Kids, families feeling like they're basically not getting what their, tax dollars are supposed to be paying for.
Mm-hmm.
So, so are we sure we really want to do that?
No, he said he already cut it.
No, I just wanted to be fully transparent that this is an option because we fund routine maintenance higher than we're required to.
Yeah, I guess, so I see the potential savings of 7 million. I guess my comment is I'm not in favor of that because there's just, I think we've had so much that we have deferred for so long on our properties and, we're getting sued over that. And I think we would save more money in making sure that we don't cut anything there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what Jeff was kind of putting out there is the ability to do, let's say, more of that work, but for less money, because we're doing things differently. We're using staff differently. We're using contracts differently. So not do less work.
Okay.
Could we, though, do more work and budget less because we're doing the work differently, is what I believe he, with his expertise and his team, would like to investigate, which would seem like then a real win-win. That
Yes.
we're doing
Yes.
even more work than we thought we could, and we're doing it for less
Great.
because we're rethinking the way we do the work.
Which would be amazing. I will just voice my concern that please don't pull away from
Well, I heard you say building internal capacity more than once today. So I know that you're reimagining the department, and I think that's probably part of the whole building internal capacity, so
Yeah.
that we can avoid these outside costs. And so we have a robust M&O department, and I know that you can take us the right way because you do have a fresh eye.
Yeah,
So let's
thank you.
keep doing that work.
Yeah, and there are opportunities. I've seen them already.
Absolutely.
So it's something I enjoy to do. So we'll get there.
Yeah, I think until our students come and tell us how wonderful their bathrooms all are, we really can't let off the gas on that one. So next we have Trustee McElroy, then Anderson, then Wygand has entered the chat, then Pearson.
Watch out. Under dues and memberships, can you give me an example of what that is?
Sure. So
I mean, I have an idea, but I want to know, like, from one extreme to another.
So a good example would be myself. The district pays for a membership, a single membership for me to be part of California School Business Officials Organization, so CASBO. Administrators get to select one organization in most cases that the district will pay for on their behalf, and that's the
Is
one
that
I
something
chose.
we vote on, or just you get to pick it?
We just got to pick it. The board got to approve the contract that allowed for it, but we got to pick it ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's the important point, is that some of these things are contractually obligated. They've already been decided by boards that approve the contract. But there are others that aren't, like if we've been a part of for a while a CTE network that started that isn't any one of the staff's memberships. It's a district membership that allows us to advocate at the state level for CTE advances. The board could say, it's important, but things like that, let's maybe do less of that. Let's maybe ask, and I'm making this up, but let's ask our consultant, capital advisors, to do that advocacy and not pay it in the dues or membership. So there are different ones, but to be clear, the ones that Jeff described are associated with a contract that's already been approved by the board.
Okay. I just was wondering if there's things on this list that we're not even aware of, and we're just paying. I'm not saying that you're not aware of, but I would be very curious to see what we're paying, who we're paying, and why we're paying them. I didn't know if it was, I didn't know what it referred to. So I'm just interested in who we're paying and what we're getting out of it.
Yeah, a good way to kind of get a picture of that is be look at the warrant list that goes to the board every month.
Okay. And then I have more. I have minimizing travel and conference. For whom? For teachers, for board members, for
This was an across-the-board assumption, so 25% across the board. It could be more or less for different folks.
okay, and when they go to these conferences, is there a list of what conferences they're going to, and is this something that we know that they're actually attending? And is it worth our money to be spending, or it would be great to reduce if it's not worth our time?
Right, so we do look at where our employees go for conferences and make sure there's a value to it so that they can bring back to our organization that value to be spread amongst wherever it's appropriate. And I know even this year alone, we've been looking really hard and we're trying to say, okay, even if it's a really nice conference to have, is it local? So maybe if it's not local this year and it's local next year, we wait till next year to go to that conference.
I mean, I almost felt guilty when I went to the conference.
CSBA?
Yeah, because it's so expensive. And, the hotel rooms and everything. And I got a lot out of it. I went to everything. But I just want to make sure that when whomever this is, who we're spending this money on, that they're actually getting out of it what they're supposed to be getting out of it.
Yeah.
And that's monitored somehow.
Yeah, we're very keen on that.
Okay, then I have another question.
And I think our hope is that we do a mindset shift, right? And the word there, the operative word, was really that it's essential. Are these the things that we really need to be going to, as opposed to the past where someone would bring something forward? And because we had different financial realities, oh, sure, now bring it back and have that accountability. But now I think we're saying, let's just make sure that this is something that is really going to benefit the district, and we're clear how, and then to your point, make sure that it does, right, once folks come back. So really kind of a mindset shift.
Accountability.
That helps us.
Like, is it,
also, yeah, thank you.
as far as consulting services, spending, I just think everything needs to be brought in-house. I mean, we have the teachers and we have I think that we could reduce that spending on just having outside, when I say consulting, I mean like contract workers. Is that what this is referring to?
Like when you bring in professional service, that would be a consultant that would be paid in that category.
Yeah.
I will say some consultants we have to use, right? Like, so an architect is a good example of
Well,
that.
I agree with that part of it, but I mean more in the learning aspect, more in the schools. Is it something that our teachers, or somebody who's already employed in the district could take over that job?
That's definitely something we can look into,
And then
that
we could save some money.
align with kind of the consideration of reduce have the goal of reducing consultant costs by 5%, up to 5%.
No, I agree with it.
Any other questions, Trustee? Okay, Trustee Anderson?
Yes, I would actually like to ask for more than 5% in that area. One of the things for me that I noticed just even on our regular agenda for today is we have an agreement for a provider to do loosely based professional development and coaching. It's very vague what that will be. And then initially we're approving the addendum today. It was originally for $100,000 and now it's $175,000. And that could be 1 or 2 people's salaries and or the people that we already have on staff. And I think one of the things that I've noticed, over multiple years is we kind of have a hodgepodge of folks that have just kind of like this rolling avalanche of people that we've acquired. And I don't know that there's any process currently in place. If we've had people who, I can think of one that has been doing consulting for us for 20 years, but it's not even a full-time thing, but we're paying them a full-time salary. I would love if it was possible to have an internal check on that where we have, is this something that current staff could do, even just 2 columns? Is this a value add of something that we don't have staff that has that skill set, doesn't have the capacity, we need someone to come outside to do that? Or do we have perhaps I have no idea of the percentage, right? It could be 70% of them are things that we could do in-house. Maybe it's 20, but I don't know that it's ever been evaluated. And so when we're talking about things to me that are as small as, in certain areas a 5% cut on something, but we have within 3 years gone up $10 million on something like this, $33 million, almost $34 million to me, this is where we should be cutting rather than thinking about something that directly impacts students like summer school for our lower performing students. So I think my concern overall is just if we're having a conversation about things that directly impact student achievement, I'm not in favor of that. And I think we've gone, last year we did the haircut route of very, very, very little, and those came back particularly departmentally as minuscule cuts. So we're here because that didn't take place last year. And so I would like to ask that we think more, it doesn't have to be a 5% where that's 5% wherever we're making cuts. To me, there's some sections like this that deserve to have a much higher amount of cuts to them, particularly because we were there 3 years ago.
Yeah, we don't have to necessarily tie a percentage to what we're looking at. We can just look at how we can do things more internally and not have to contract out.
Yes, thank you.
And I think following up on Trustee Anderson's point, we must have had the same mental thing going on. I drew up a rubric for identifying if a contract should or shouldn't proceed, so I can share that with you after. But basically, same thing, just a simple thing before we enter into a contract with any provider to do any consulting or service for our district, have does this increase student learning outcomes, yes or no? Does this increase student wellness, yes or no? Is it any way to provide it in-house already? Is there anyone in-house remotely qualified that could be trained up to provide it? And just this series of questions before we go and enter into contracts that could be 75 grand here, 100 grand here. Just, can we possibly do it? Can we pay 1 year to pilot it and then our staff learns how to do it themselves, kind of thing? To think more responsibly about the contracting item, because I think that seems to be a concern for all of us. So the 5% is fine for the other departments if that's a good goal, but this one seems like you could more targeted, have more rapid decreases in those costs, maybe, if that's something that could move forward as an idea to just have a plan for how to sharpen the spending in that area. But with that, next we have Trustee Wygand and then Pearson.
Hi, I was wondering on the services and operating, where it says professional services and utilities, and this is kind of going into their professional consulting services as well. I don't know what page number, but it's the one that says, professional and services utilities.
42. What slide
Yep,
number?
right there. So, So are these professional services, does that include our project managers that we hired for the summer collective?
That is in Fund 40, and I'm going to get to that on a later slide, and I will show you that. But so, no, this does not.
Okay.
This is all just general fund. It does include the professional services, the consultants, but also all of our utility costs as well.
Okay, so it looks like, I mean, in 4 years it went up, you know, our utilities, do you think most of that is because of our utilities increased?
I think when you look, you can kind of, when you look at each category, you can see that the sub-agreements for services almost doubled. Travel and conference has been fairly consistent. Dues and memberships, again, minor amount. Insurance is a big jump, and that was because of the AB 218 premium adjustment that we're paying annually. Operations and housekeeping, modest growth. Rentals, leases, and repairs, this has increased a lot.
Yeah.
So this is a significant contributor to that. And then minor. And then our professional consulting services, the 10 million. I think those are the two primary categories.
And then on the rentals, leases, and repairs, a big jump from 23, 24 to 24, 25. Are those some of the portables that we purchased?
It could be. It would be a lot of the deferred and routine maintenance that is that's been increased since that time, where we're contracting out those services. So like the CUPCA contract awards, et cetera.
Because I'm just wondering, that was a big jump that year, and I'm wondering if it was, you know, our planning for that or our planning for the summer collective, where we procured a lot more materials and decided to do a lot more repairs at that point.
Yeah, that would be tied to the maintenance program for sure. Yes.
And obviously things during that 4-year time period for materials have increased, you know,
quite a bit,
4 times in some of those. So that is, you know, some things we can't avoid. But and then I had another on the also on the non-instructional instructional supplies, that increases. Now are these some of our technology items as well?
Oh yes, it would be anything under the $5,000 would fall into that.
Okay. Knowing that this industry is under a lot of pressure right now for price increases, I would imagine that you're going to see that increase regardless if you buy more or less. So there's those types of things that you're just going to see. Like a laptop's going to cost maybe even twice as more this year than it did last year. So those types of things are going to be, it's going to be tough because of inflation and what's happening in the market. And then the other thing is that I wanted to make sure, as we're talking about board considerations on building internal capacities or changing up how we spend on routine maintenance. I know we started this 8 school rotational elementary upgrades last year, that we were going to upgrade 8 elementary schools every year with new bathrooms, playgrounds, whatever else that they needed, shade structures, those types of things. I want to make sure that we keep those types of promises in place, because we had 8 schools that received some great upgrades, but you know, all of our schools need it so that we can keep doing those rotational upgrades that we had promised. So that's where I'm coming from. And that's great. Thank you for all this. I love the building internal capacities, but I do want to make sure that as we're looking at outside consultants or our capabilities in-house, sometimes there are people that are just better at it, and for us to hire that person, it might not be cost effective. But also, I want to make sure, as we're doing professional services and those types of things, that sometimes we go outside of our little community here because we don't want to become so insular in our thinking, that we might have someone that does something better than we can do. Because I want to make sure that we're still looking for the best out there as opposed to the best just internal.
Got it. Totally understand.
Which would be technology. I mean, you mentioned
Technology or
would be
new
huge.
thoughts and ideas on education that we might not have here.
As a consultant, I can't agree more. Yes.
That's okay. Yeah,
Next, Trustee Pearson.
Krista, actually, her last question was mine. Just selfishly, the concern about our playgrounds and our shade structures at the elementary schools. Are we still budgeting for that? Do we have the money for that?
So that's why this budget study session is so important. We currently don't have any money in Fund 40 to contribute for those projects, but if we save money we can contribute money from general fund to Fund 40 to get those projects back on track. And that's why it's important, I think, and it'll be better for us if we can get an annual amount that we contribute to Fund 40, so we know how much it's going to build up over time, and then we can time out our projects appropriately, and then we're not making promises before the money exists. We want to be able to plan it out properly.
So we're hearing less consulting and more playgrounds?
For a minute. As needed. And then last up, Trustee Crane, and I'm looking at the clock. We have about 45 minutes left for everything. So if this can be the last question on this one, and then he can continue to the next section.
Okay, so as far as expenditure from capital outlay, does finishing up the Estancia Theater help in these numbers? Because we're done spending on that. That was a major project. And then secondly, I haven't heard anything about Fund 17. Can we take some of that money? Have we already allocated that amount to something specific? Because I know we had, I think, Trustee Anderson, was it NPRs? Yeah, audio visual. So where are we going to go next with that? Because that's money we can spend.
Yeah, and that was reallocated to support the summer collective work.
Right.
So that is another area when we talk about building up our reserves, because we know Fund 17 counts towards that calculation.
Right.
That's where we want to do it.
Okay.
And so that's an area that we're going to have to look at growing as well. So in addition to supporting Fund 40, which will be used for our projects, Fund 17, the idea would be just build it up as a reserve.
Okay. So not spend it this year. Okay.
Prefer it is not, that's not a decision for me to make,
Right,
but it's
a recommendation.
I would recommend that to the board, because then if you can get it to a large enough amount, it'll grow based off its interest alone to support the percentage increase for budget appropriate reserve level.
And then the Estancia question?
Estancia will help because it came out of Fund 40, so you'll see those numbers in there.
They won't be as big moving forward? Okay. Is that why the bump at 24, 25 at almost 4.6?
All the work, yes, all
Okay.
the work, including Estancia.
Okay.
One more. Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, just to follow up on that. I wanted to make sure, and maybe this is a Dr. Smith thing, but Fund 17 wasn't used for over 25 years because it was attached to CPI. And so we've only started using it in the past few years. The NPR AV project was literally the first use. And so I'm really hesitant for that to go back to not being used again, particularly when we've been talking about the need for things at the sites for specific purposes. And I just want to make sure I'm looking again at this item 5 for our agenda tonight, because the TIC money, the Irvine Company money, has specific designations of what the uses can be. And I don't believe that it's for construction. And I don't know what these items are. It says capital reserve for capital, it says capital outlay, and facilities is not what that fund is allocated for. It has really clear markers that it's for instructional enhancements. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we were approving it tonight, because I don't know if people were aware of that.
Okay, I'm
Thank
not
you.
looking at item 5 right now, but we'll definitely take a look. Okay, so now we're moving into our capital outlay, the 6,000s. You can see, and again, this is just general fund. It's budgeted for a little less than we had spent in 2022-23. And again, these are all projects or pieces of equipment that exceed $5,000. That's why they would get coded in this area. Then you look at the history from Fund 40, and that's where you see a dramatic increase in 24-25, and we're finishing out this year 25-26. So this is the bulk of the summer work, all the safety enhancements, the theaters improvements. It's a big chunk of money, and this I think would be a goal we want to set, that we have this opportunity again within the next decade, and we can do that through prudent saving and planning. And so that's really what this is going to help us achieve. So we talked about building internal capacity. I'm happy to say that Lance Bidnick and I have already been in discussions about what we could do specific with our maintenance department that would allow us, as Dr. Smith referenced, to do the same amount of work for less money. And oddly enough, it has to do with eliminating the need for all the consultant use. So we're already working on that, and that's just one idea. I've heard a lot of discussion on the consultants, and we'll take a look at that as a staff, see if there's other opportunities for approved efficiency. But right now, we're seeing that based on our consultant costs versus what we would have to do staffing-wise and reorganization-wise, we could see a potential savings of $500,000 and still accomplish the same amount of work. So that would be a specific example of what Dr. Smith had referenced earlier. Now I want to open it up to any ideas you might have specific to our capital improvement program or our capital expenditures.
So I have a question about the capital, so that budgeted amount, that's 61 million. So you mentioned, you know, if you can work smarter, not harder, you can save maybe like $500,000. Is it realistic that we'll ever get to that 60 million without a bond?
It just depends on the time. How long do you want to wait? Because I think realistically, you're not going to be able to contribute $20 million a year to Fund 40. It's going to take a lot of time.
Like how long?
It depends on how much we want to contribute or can contribute to Fund 40 every year. Right now, that's at a starting point of 0.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Murphy?
But I believe the facilities master plan, the initial estimate for the basic upgrades that we needed to do was around $200-300 million. And I'm assuming, though, we're looking at, that was 2 years ago, I believe.
When you look at the, so I recently looked at it, but I didn't get like the basic versus the full master plan. I just had the total cost for all projects. And it does include an escalator. So you had a 4% escalator year over year based on their estimate. It was about $2.5 billion total.
Yeah. So we're not going to be able to save that.
Not while we're here. Yes.
So it does beg the question of a school bond and how much that would help us reach those goals of being able to address all of the facilities master plan ideas, issues, asks that the community had, because the community was so involved in putting together the facilities master plan.
Yeah, the feedback was nice to see because it was all documented on and it's a web-based master plan, so you can get through it and see where the priorities fell. But yeah, to your point, to do the improvement sooner rather than later, it would take something like a general obligation bond.
Yeah, and that also would reduce the cost, actually, of all the projects long-term, if we could do it now, rather than waiting for them to all get more expensive.
Yeah, as we know, costs never seem to go down year over year. They always go up.
Thank you.
And Trustee Anderson?
Yes. For this specific budget, I wanted to go back to the slide that you had about reorganizing M&O, maintenance and operations. And it has on there a potential savings of $500,000. I was just wondering, similarly to the consulting section that we discussed, if there is possibly a way to double that. It looks like in the overtime alone, which is the budgeted line item that's been there for several years, that's $450. For uniforms and hand tools, which I know we're not buying the same amount every single year, it has been $850,000 year to year to year to year for over 5 years. And then we have consultants. This year was budgeted for $735,000. So just with 3 items alone, those are quite large items that maybe could be lowered in our budgeting for the future year, particularly even if it's only just for 1 year, right? As we're like this year monitoring things a little bit more closely. So I think for me, I would just ask if there's a way to up that amount as well, than more than $500K. Thank you.
Yeah. I think we would treat those as 3 separate look into type of things. So the $500K was specific just to a reorganization and limiting consultant use. So it had nothing to do with the overtime, and so that certainly if we were able to find ways to reduce the overtime, as I heard we wanted to look into earlier, it would be more.
Yeah, well, to me, it's internal capacity, right? So to me, it's connected. Also, uniforms, right? If we're hiring new people, if we're not. So to me, they're kind of connected. But yes, I hear what you're saying.
Yep.
Great. I think you can move on to the final section and the final discussion.
Okay. So, as you know, we received a large amount of one-time money from pandemic relief. For us, it was about $90 million, and this is just specific to one-time funding. And you see all the different sources of the funds. Some had restrictions, some did not, some were fully discretionary. It led to a lot, and still to this day is a lot of reporting. Our fiscal team is very busy with that. But the money's spent out. So we're finally got the one-time money. It is gone. The issue that we're having now is that 72%, or roughly 66 million of that 90 million, was spent on staffing. So those are ongoing costs. And so our general fund absorbs that, right? About 10% was on materials and supplies and 18% on services. So those are not necessarily ongoing, but where the biggest chunk we spent was on staffing. And it makes sense because there was a lot of support and services added for our kids with the learning loss and recovery that we're trying to address. And we still have some of those needs today. So I just want to acknowledge that we did receive a large chunk of one-time money, and we did spend it on areas that were ongoing. So speaking of ongoing funding, we know that there's the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, and that goes to support our after-school programs, Title I schools, and our summer school. And the reason we're having this budget study, one of the reasons we're having this budget study session so early this year is because we need to get your direction on summer school. We were able to expand summer school quite dramatically because the first few years we had significant carryover, and you can see that on this, where the beginning balance went up to over 4.3 million in 2023-24. However, since then, it's gone down to the point where next year we are not going to have any carryover. So it's about 50 cents in the negative, right? So we're going to use next year's full allocation of ELOP to support the after-school programs in this summer school. When you look at the cost of summer school, this is the last 3 years, and that's where we come up with, it's about $1 million per school because we had 4 schools in summer school last year. You can see it went arranged between 3.5 to 4.2 million. So one of the things we're looking to get your direction on is we would propose doing summer school at Wilson, Whittier, College Park, so going from 4 to 3 schools. You can see there's reasons up here for why we think it fills the need for our summer school program. But more importantly, I think it's important to point out that we would have to prioritize enrollment. So Title I and UPP students would get first priority, non-Title I but UPP students second priority, and then non-Title I, non-UPP third priority. And it would likely or could lead to a wait list. And that's why having those priorities spelled out is important, I think, for your discussion. So we do not get requests for summer school. We make recommendations for our students to attend summer school. So there is no list of requests that I can provide, but we do, our staff provides recommendations to families. The next few slides, you can just see the history of our enrollment at summer school. This is from last year. And you can see the previous year in 2023-24. And then 22-23. So with that information, we're looking, hopefully you can provide us some direction on what your thoughts are on summer school and the offerings, the prioritization, potential wait list, and knowing that we are starting with 0 in our ELOP, so it's going to be tight. It's going to likely require general fund support because the ELOP funding it's going down slightly. So.
Well, and just to set a little backdrop before we start this, I'm sure, passionate discussion, these 3 sites are with ELOP funding. And ELOP funding comes with requirements. It has to be full day, and we have to prioritize the students in the way you saw listed. As we've said in past years, we can build out summer school. This year, the question is, we have the funds through ELOP for the students who need it most. If we want to expand out, and again, we have to do the full day, we have to go to 6. That is one of the ELOP requirements. If you choose to expand that, part of it, why we only suggested 3, is simply for the funding that we have for this grant, from the grant for this purpose. If you want to expand that with other funds somehow, we can certainly make other options work. But with the funds we have, these are the 3 sites we propose.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. So, yeah, it is clear that those 3 sites are what we have the actual ELOP budget for, and anything else would go into all of these cuts that we're trying to make. It would just be making that harder. So with that, we'll go to Trustee Wygan, Pearson, and Crane.
Can you explain on on these charts? Because you say College Park, Killiebrook, and Newport Heights, the Gen Ed enrollment Title I schools. So I guess I'm just kind of confused on these charts because that's not where we had summer school, right? In those years?
These are our Title I schools that had summer school, because what we were showing is where our Title I students go to school. So in Title I schools, when we offer summer school, that gets the highest percentage, usually, of students. Where we had non-Title I schools, and I can certainly share that with the board at another time, the percentage was only 30% Title I students and 70% non-Title I students. And for ELOP and ELOP funds, that isn't what we can do. In the years past, when we had all of that one-time money, we were like, we could do a lot of things with that one-time money, and there were a lot of students who had post-pandemic needs in a way that we were able to serve with that one-time money.
I guess I was just looking at this and I'm like, I don't think we had summer school at Newport Heights the last 2 years. It was at Mariners.
No, it was also at Mariners, but it was at Heights as well.
Ooh, don't think so.
Christy gave me this information,
Really?
so I can double check. But
Yeah, double check that because I don't know if that was the case. Because I know Newport Heights was getting roofing done and new blacktop. So I don't think that's the case. But what I was hoping to see on this data is how many non-Title I students did we have enrolled in summer school on these?
I can get you that information, and you can see from the Title I sites and these sites, if it's non-UPP, those are non-Title I students.
Okay, because I'm just looking at, I would love to be able to see how many students from the non-Title I schools went to and needed summer school, because as a parent who has used summer school when my child was suggested that they go, it was very, very useful. And I think, I'll say it again, but I think public schools for all, regardless of where you live. So I would like to see that opportunity for all students that need it. And, if there is something where it's like education in the mornings, that would be great. And if there was something in the afternoon for those non-Title I students that say they can, pay in addition for some kind of enhancement, or enrichment, I should say, that would be, I think, something that they'd be willing to do. But I just think that not having those for those struggling students, just because of where they live, is kind of it's not the Newport-Mesa way, but I also think it's reckless for our students. So I'd like to see a site to add for those students, because all students have needs, right? So that's my input.
Just to confirm, we were at Heights last
You were
year.
at Heights?
Yeah. And we
Interesting.
do have a proposal-ish that we could do an AM only at other sites as well. If, again, you have the bigger discussion about the dollars in the budget and where you want to spend it. But if you wanted a lower cost option, we could do an AM only, academics only, and open the site up for other entities to do the enrichment services like we do now at those schools after school. So that is another option, and we think that would cost us about $500,000.
Trustee Pearson?
Well, ditto what Krista said. First, thank you for all those years of that amazing summer school program. I mean, I think that Newport-Mesa put that one-time money in the best spot possible for all of our kids. And I think that's why it's so hard for us to let go of it, because we know how important it was to our parents. We know the scores. We know our scores went up. We know worked well for our kids. I do have a problem with not offering it to our Newport Beach in our area. We have kids that need intervention. We have kids that can't afford enrichment. And I don't think it's right. I don't think it's fair. I do think it's reckless not to do that. So yeah, I'm all for giving them that intervention, at least one school in the Newport Beach area. And I know our parents will pay for that. You know, we talked about this earlier, having them pay for an enrichment part, you know, if we went all day. I'm pretty sure most of them would be happy with that. And I walked the campuses every summer that we had it. I mean, it was like Disneyland. I mean, I think our teacher ratio to kids, I mean, there were 3, 4. I mean, when we walked, there were like 3 teachers in every classroom. I mean, it was just amazing. We can definitely, it doesn't have to be, we can definitely cut back on that. But just offering a few things, you know, the music and the plays or something, we can cut back. But it is really important to me that we do offer some sort of summer school in the Newport Beach area.
Trustee Crane and then Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, ditto Trustee Wygand and Trustee Pearson. I think there's a need for schools. They're not only Newport addresses, it's pretty much south of Newport Boulevard. We need a site south of Newport Boulevard and southwest, I guess, whatever, you know what I mean. And there's no question that there are needs of students also southwest of Newport Boulevard that we need to offer for our community. I think not only is it, and we're trying to achieve close the achievement gap, we're also trying to close the opportunity gap, and we need an opportunity for all students in Newport-Mesa, including the, southwest of Newport Boulevard. I do have a quick question. So the chart shows, is it 58? That the cost is $1 million a school for summer school to have a summer school program. We were the one that said.
That's the summer school program that we have run. So that's the full
day. That's the Disneyland.
That's the full day.
If it cost $1 million a school and we went down a school, why is it still about $1 million a school?
We didn't go down a school. That is the Title I schools and their data. I can get for you the board. We had 4 sites last year.
Right, so that's why it was 24, 25 was 4 million. So then if we're going down to 3 for next summer, why is it still 3.889?
That's this past year.
Was it this past?
No, you have it. Oh, is that the year that we're going into?
Fiscal year.
Oh, okay, fiscal year, got
Correct.
it. Okay. Okay, because, wait, that still doesn't make sense?
Fiscal year starts.
Yeah.
Oh, July.
Because most of the summer school happens.
July, got it.
Yep.
Okay, and then are those 100% funded by ELOP, or is there any, the summer school, the proposal that you were proposing, is it all 100%?
They were, yes. We were able to do that because of the carryover from those first
Okay.
2 years.
And then I noticed that in the governor's budget, there's no COLA adjustment, so if we were to move forward, would that be then absorbed by the general fund?
General fund.
For those ELOP schools? For summer school moving on,
If a
or after-school
non-ELOP.
programs and all that. So we probably need to make sure that we account for the loss of COLA according to the governor's budget, right?
At this point, I'd just be cautious and wait for the May
Early?
revision. But between May revision and the budget adoption, there might be changes as well. So I think the conservative approach is you just assume it's not going to happen.
Okay. And then branching out a little bit, are we still going to offer a summer language program for our EL learners at Mesa, like we did in the past?
It won't be at Mesa, but yes, there will be a summer language academy. There will be a bridge program. There are secondary
So we're going to maintain
options.
all those, because secondary, we didn't get a lot of info on secondary. Any changes in secondary that we need to be aware of that affects our budget or decisions?
All of our opportunities will be maintained this year. We are offering them differently, and they are more cost-effective. We will be at T-Winkle this year because Costa Mesa is going to be painted and new asphalt, smiles all around.
Yes, well aware.
So that school will be basically shut down for a little while. So we'll be at T-Winkle, but we'll be offering summer bridge there. We will have online opportunities for students to take coursework through Monte Vista. We'll also have a partnership with Mount Sac, which is also online, where we can send our students, or our students would be able to have their content delivered asynchronously. So we've also widened the opportunities, and also dual enrollment college classes will be offered. And we've also reduced our cost by doing that.
Okay. Thank you. That's it. I just want to reiterate that we would like an option on, I'll say it again, southwest of Newport Boulevard.
Definitely heard. Trustee Anderson, then Trustee Murphy.
Thank you. Following up on that, I wanted to know, because I was really impressed by the changes. I think it'll be great for secondary. Do you have an estimate of those cost savings? Not having so much on-site?
Yeah, I do not have an actual dollar amount. We can go ahead and get that information for you and provide it to the board. But we would definitely be saving in personnel costs. We wouldn't be hiring as many teachers. You may remember in the past I've stated that finding summer school teachers at the high school level is very difficult. And so at times we end up hiring people outside of our organization, which has been problematic and challenging. But we can definitely provide you with some numbers.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. I also think it's great to do dual enrollment for kids who may not have thought of doing that. I took geometry in the summer, and it was great, and I got to meet people from the whole district. It was a lovely time. I want to echo the concerns about offering it at only 3 sites. For me, in looking at some of the data that we have recently received, I think it's clear that particularly because we don't offer transportation for summer school, there is a need for summer school specifically at Paularino, which is walkable from Sonora and Killebrook. And I also, based on some of that the data that we saw, I think it makes a lot of sense to have at least one at East Bluff and maybe somewhere else. Again, for me, I think we're here for student achievement. One of the conversations I remember really well that Trustee Wiegand brought up, it must have been in 2020 or 21, when we started doing summer school again after having robust conversations with previous board members, was bringing it back so everyone who needs it has access to it. That was something that was a value of all of us, and I as I think I've told several people in cabinet, I was equally surprised to only see it at 3, and I think it's problematic. I think if we have students, particularly if it's high need students who need that support, to not offer that, to me, I also have a big problem with that. I think that's what we're here for. I would love to eliminate $2 million, $10 million in consultants before we're thinking of doing something like that. So I also support our students really getting these needs met in the summer and thinking about it creatively, if that's in the mornings or whatever that looks like. But I think it's really important that's available across our district.
Great. And I think before we go to Trustee Murphy, I just have a clarifying question. What does transportation look like for summer schools? Can you clarify, staff?
Yeah, we don't offer it.
Okay.
ESY does, but ESY is not included in these calculations. It's separate and apart.
In money only, in funding only. Other than that, we're together.
We really are.
But it hasn't been offered for at least 2 years, correct?
I'll
Maybe
double
more.
check with Christy, but I mean, that's one of our cost saving measures.
Okay, so there's no transportation to any of these sites? Okay. All right, Trustee Murphy.
Well, yeah, seems like transportation is a problem, but I just wanted to voice that, yes, I think that we should still have a site on the Newport side or east side Costa Mesa. I've talked to the principal at Newport Heights. I know that a lot of our students that go to school over there, maybe the school isn't technically a Title I, but there's plenty of students who qualify or could qualify. That they're close to being those elementary schools are close to being Title I. So, yes, I would like to see another school site as well, and even if it's just the morning academic, and certainly the afternoon enrichment. But I think we have to offer that opportunity to our kids, to all of our kids who might need it. Across the district. And is there could we look into if there was transportation offered, could some of our kids get to summer school if they don't live close to it?
Just to clarify too, because I misspoke, we do offer transportation for ELOP students. Again, this is where if the board has the desire and the budget is identified, we could transport other children, but ELOP transportation for UPP students. So in the past, even if there were children who qualified for ELOP funds in any part of town, we could get them to wherever summer school is. So it didn't restrict, and we did have ELOP students from other schools, for example, UPP students. And remember, in the language of the grant, UPP is foster youth, low income, and English learner. That's how the money is described. So, for example, we have had students from East Bluff attend other sites when it wasn't at East Bluff, and providing transportation is something we could use the ELOP funds for.
So then it is the case that there is transportation for the students that are the UPP students. If they live in Newport, if they go to East Bluff or Anderson, they still can get transportation to Wilson Whittier College Park.
Yeah. It's not door to door. It might not be convenient for families. I mean, there are a lot of ifs in the transportation world. But yes, there is transportation. There are buses flowing.
Okay. Thanks. Trustee Murphy?
Yeah, no, that would be my concern, is that those students who would qualify from the Newport side would be able to get to summer school. So
Qualify as UPP students,
Yes.
and then I do know that there's been discussion about other students who would also benefit from summer school.
And I know we didn't, I think, Jeff, you mentioned a waiting list, so do we have waiting lists?
In the past, we've been able, again, because we were flush with these one-time monies, we were able to serve all the students who applied. If we limit ourselves to ELOP funds this year, we would have to generate a waiting list.
A waiting list. Would you then be able, would your spot on the waiting list be determined on whether you qualified?
It depends on how we're funding it.
Trustee Anderson?
Would it be possible using some of our data tracking to see what some of those numbers look like? If that's looking like 15 or 20 kids from one school out of 400 or 500, to me that's particularly, even if as a worst case scenario, if we charged a minuscule amount for transportation, if it was more than 2 miles, I think for me, I would just like for us to think kind of out of the box about this. We've been doing it one way because we had these funds, but I think you're hearing that it's a priority for us to continue offering this and maybe doing it differently. I just think it would be great, even if a student is high need and they need this assistance, even if they're not unduplicated, to me, we still need to figure out a way to meet those needs, even if we need to find a different way to fund it.
We work with transportation, but I'm sure we'll get creative. I'm sure Jeff heard all your passion as well. Forward to elegant
Summer school and bathrooms, Jeff.
Yeah, every meeting bathrooms. Yeah.
I've heard Laguna Beach has really nice bathrooms. They were bright. That's where.
So
We've heard that,
I'm kind of hearing a consensus then. You want to look at exploring having a summer school on the Newport side, possibly AM academic only with pay for enrichment in the afternoon. And then we'll talk through some transportation opportunities if they exist. But at least for summer school planning, it sounded like everyone was on the same page with the AM academic and then possible enrichment pay to do.
Yeah. That sounded good.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to end with, this is our multi-year projection. You saw this at first interim. We know our goal is to get back to above 17% in reserves. We are still in good financial health, but we want to be better. And I think that it's a goal and a priority for our board. I appreciate you entertaining my, not so much somber, but really direct look into our expenditures today. I think it was a very different tone than what you had last year, and so I knew it would be a little different. But I think we're fairly clear on exactly what we need to look into and where we can find more efficiency within our operations and help our budget. So again, if we were to do everything that you saw as a consideration, it would get us up to 16.4% in our reserve levels by the end of next year. So obviously we're not doing that, but I think it's a good marker, a good way to show that we have potential where we can make more efficient decisions, and it will have an immediate impact on our reserve levels.
Great.
With that, any final thoughts?
Thank you. I think Trustee McElroy and Crane.
I just want to thank you for all this. I meant to ask this earlier. Is there in this area, in this budget, does it show the money that we spend on our food and that we provide for our children? Is that in this budget? Has it gone, is that anywhere in here?
It's a great question. No, this was purely general fund. So nutrition services is a separate fund, Fund 13. So we can certainly pull that information for you, but it was not part of this.
Do you know if it's gone up? Are we spending more of this? Do you know?
I'm almost positive we are, because I believe our participation in the program has increased.
Are we adjusting the menu to be, I mean, I've heard some complaints from the kids, they get pizza every day and stuff. So is that something that we can discuss at another time in the budget, regarding the budget and what is spent on the food?
Yeah.
And what type of food we're feeding our children?
Yeah, that would be separate to specific nutrition. And I can
But
tell you
in
that
the-
they are making menu modifications and talking to the students. And so that is happening. But yeah, I think it's definitely something we can talk about.
But please don't take the pizza away at CDM. It's the only thing my daughter eats. so please don't.
There will be a
Yes, there will be a big walkout. Trustee Crane?
Yes. First of all, I want to compliment everyone who had a part in this because this is probably the most robust conversation we've had about the budget and also the most insight where we actually understand and are making decisions that are impactful and educated. So thank you very much, because I know this was a lot of work. So I appreciate the transparency, I appreciate the candidness, and also the thorough information that you shared with us. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and the way you did it, Jeff.
Yeah.
The format was fantastic. I feel like we were able to get our parents' voices to you. It was excellent. It was very well done.
Yeah, just this was serendipitously, whatever you say, serendipitously. I had gotten a text today from one of my constituents. Do you know anything about this year's NMUSD summer program? And then said something about the fact that the summer program has been amazing and we would love for the kids to be a part of it again. And that's without me soliciting any information from this family. I did have a question. Are these numbers, are those based on our property tax revenue being at what percent again?
The revenue,
Yeah,
that 7% growth year over year.
7%. Okay, so are we projecting anything different moving forward from what you've heard? Or
Not at this time.
Okay.
However, if you recall, we had, speaking of consultants, we had a property tax revenue
yeah.
consultant.
we approved a contract for that
We just got their forecast.
2 months ago. Yeah.
We just got their forecasts and haven't been able to dive into it yet.
Okay.
But, so they may change at second interim, but
Okay.
we'll be able to call that out.
All right, we look forward to that. This is important consulting, because we're not experts.
Yeah.
We can't do that internally. So that's a good expenditure. But, and then secondly, are we at all considering revenue-based, an approach that's revenue-based as far as our balance sheet? Like looking into the lease renewals, ways we can increase our revenue in that sense? Or I also mentioned like developer fees. I know Costa Mesa's very kind of building. There's plans for RENA, also Newport, but not yet as much to the degree. So are we also looking at that side of the balance sheet to increase our revenue and get a little more comfortable with, that?
Yeah, so our lease revenue is very minimal, very small right now, but I think we have a really great opportunity through our strategic planning exercise to look at other opportunities to collecting revenue and helping us on that side of our budget.
Are we allowed to do triple net leases?
Triple net leases?
Yeah.
I don't know all that's an Andreas question.
okay.
But we are somewhat limited with how we can lease out our properties, how we can use the revenue in some cases, like if you sell a property, has to be used on facilities improvements versus if you lease, like what we've been looking at for ground lease, it can be used for operational costs. So it gets fairly specific.
Okay. I think triple net is when the lessee pays for the costs of maintenance and things like that, and taxes. So I was just wondering if it's something that we can kind of start delving into. And I know that, a lot of our lessees are nonprofits and everything, but, classroom first, kids first.
One thing that I can give you a finite example of is in Laguna Beach. They had sold elementary school that they closed with the option to repurchase it back in 2041 for $1. So that's a way you can transfer all the maintenance costs to them. And yeah, so there's options like that exist that would be very similar to that lease option.
Awesome.
And then also lease terms, not too long of lease terms. Because I know we have one right now that's 30-year lease. It's like, what? Because things change. All right. That's
And
it.
along those
Sorry.
lines, this morning I actually went to a webinar that was, I think, put on by your group, CASPO, right? Is that
CASPO.
which we pay your membership fee to, which
Thank
is
you.
very useful. CASPO does useful things. It was the federal fiscal and political impacts on student mental health and wellness. And it was talking about, to Trustee Crane's point, about fee-for-service models where districts can get higher reimbursements, more widespread reimbursements for mental health services. And so I've shared that information with staff, and maybe that's something that we can look into. Because, those of us with a student athlete, we give the district, we give you guys our insurance information. I think if anyone goes on a field trip abroad, they give you the insurance information. If you have an IEP, the district gets your student's information. But if there's a way that we can just, at registration, maybe get every student's health insurance information so that all of these services, we have so much invested in counselors and support services, just to make sure we maximize our reimbursements on all of those so that we can make some profit off of it.
That's a great point. Thank you.
So I shared it with Carrie and folks.
We had a contract for that. We had someone that was doing that.
They're doing
Melissa
some.
heard it, and then someone else, but we never heard how much we were
Yeah, they're
recouping.
doing some, and it's not like full scale yet.
Right.
So they're going to look into it. So with that, I guess we can, at 4:26, adjourn.
Wow,
Okay, thank you so much. That was really
Thank you.
excellent.
that was great.